Ever had that gut feeling she's hiding something, but you just couldn't prove it? What if I told you there's a way to catch any woman in a lie instantly, without raising your voice, without chasing her down, and without ever looking insecure? This is not about games, it's about truth, power, and protecting your peace. In any conversation, especially one where emotions run high or truths are being questioned, silence can be the most powerful tool you have. Most men, when they feel something's off, when they suspect a woman is lying, fall into the trap of overreacting. They demand answers, raise their voices, or become overly emotional. What they don't realize is that by reacting this way, they give away all their power. A woman who knows she's lying will use that moment to flip the script. She'll play the victim, accuse you of being controlling, or turn the focus onto your tone instead of her words. But when you introduce silence instead of confrontation, something very different happens. Silence disrupts the flow of deception. It creates space where her mind has to race to fill the gap, and in that moment of mental scrambling, the truth often slips out, or at least the cracks in the lie begin to show. Let's say, for example, you ask her, "Where were you Friday night after work?" If she responds quickly with something like, "I went out with the girls," and you immediately say, "Who was there?" Or, "Why didn't you tell me?" You're jumping too fast. Instead, ask your question and pause. Let the silence hang in the air. Let it get uncomfortable. Don't shift your eyes. Don't break the tension. Just hold that space. A woman who is telling the truth will usually meet you calmly. She might answer steadily, maintain eye contact, and her story will flow naturally. But a woman who is lying, her silence will be filled with tension. She'll fidget, clear her throat, look away, or try to talk herself into sounding more confident than she is. The silence forces her to perform, and in that performance, mistakes are made. Timing is the other side of this strategy. It's not just about being silent, it's when you're silent. It's about knowing when to withdraw your energy, when to lean back emotionally, and when to observe instead of react. Imagine this. You notice she's acting distant lately. Conversations are shorter. She's suddenly more protective of her phone, and she doesn't engage with you like she used to. Instead of interrogating her, you pull back. You stop chasing connection. You let your energy go still. This is the power of timing. Your silence at this moment speaks louder than any question you could ask. She will notice. And if there's something she's hiding, the weight of your quiet presence will begin to pressure her. She'll either come forward with the truth or begin unraveling in the form of odd behavior, contradictions, or even guilt-based overcompensation. Let's break down another example. You're in a conversation with her about a guy you noticed liking all her posts, someone she previously claimed was just an old friend. You ask her, "Have you been talking to him lately?" Now pause. Watch her. If she immediately says, "No," and then fills the space with a long explanation that wasn't asked for, something like, I haven't talked to him at all. I don't even know why he's still liking my stuff. Maybe he's just bored or something." She's doing what liars often do, overcompensating. That silence after your question became so uncomfortable for her that she couldn't let it sit. She had to fill it, fast. And in doing so, she gave you more information than you asked for, most of it unnecessary, most of it suspect. On the other hand, if you time your silence after emotional conversations, moments when she's expecting you to be reactive, and instead give her nothing, you shift the power dynamic. Let's say she says something designed to provoke you, like, "I just feel like you don't really care anymore." Instead of arguing or defending yourself, just look at her. Say nothing. Wait. Let the silence stretch. In that space, she will either start explaining herself, revealing her deeper thoughts, or she will become visibly uncomfortable if the statement was meant to manipulate. In either case, you get more truth from silence than you would from an argument. Most men underestimate how powerful it is to remain calm and quiet. They feel pressure to say something, to prove a point, or demand the truth. But when you develop the discipline to observe rather than immediately react, you start seeing things that were always there but never obvious. Silence, timed correctly, doesn't just expose lies. It builds your self-control, sharpens your awareness, and shows her that you cannot be emotionally manipulated. One of the most overlooked but incredibly powerful tools for detecting deception lies in the human face, specifically microexpressions. These are fleeting, involuntary facial expressions that occur within a fraction of a second, usually 1/25th to 1/5 of a second, and they reveal a person's true emotions before their brain can override them. These expressions are universal, meaning they appear on the faces of people across all cultures, ages, and backgrounds. The catch is, most people don't notice them because they happen so fast. But if you train your eye, if you remain calm, observant, and emotionally neutral, you can begin to see what most people miss. Microexpressions are the body's first reaction to emotional stimuli. When a woman is lying, her words may say one thing, but her face, if you look closely, might betray the truth. That tiny flicker of fear, guilt, or contempt, that's not imagination, that's evidence. Let's say, for example, you ask a woman if she was with her ex the other night after you noticed something odd in her behavior. She answers with a smile, maybe even with laughter, and says, "What? Of course not. Why would I do that?" On the surface, she looks confident. But if you had your eyes on her face in that first split second after asking the question, you might have seen her eyebrows raise in a flash of surprise, or her mouth tighten slightly in fear. These micro-expressions disappear almost instantly because people subconsciously correct their facial expressions to match what they want you to believe. But the emotional truth always shows up first, before the lie gets packaged and delivered. These moments are so brief that unless you're fully present, you'll miss them. Consider the expression of contempt. Contempt is displayed through one side of the mouth, raising slightly, almost like a half smile, but it isn't friendly. It signals disrespect, arrogance, or dislike. Now imagine you're discussing a topic with a woman, maybe about someone she claims not to like or care about. You bring up that guy's name, and before she answers, for just a split second, you see that corner smirk. That's contempt. Even if she goes on to say, "I don't even think about him," that moment before her words told the truth. Her contempt reveals that she does feel something, possibly disdain, or possibly that she's hiding her true interest. The point is, the facial expression said more than the words ever could. Another key expression to look for is fear. It typically appears with raised eyebrows, widened eyes, and lips pulled back tightly. You ask her a direct question, one that she wasn't expecting. Maybe, "Did you tell me the full truth about where you were last weekend?" Before she answers, her eyes widen for a split moment, her face tightens, and then she recovers with a calm voice and a steady explanation. That moment of fear didn't come from nowhere. It was her initial raw emotional reaction to being caught off guard. A truthful person might look confused or irritated by the question, but they won't show fear unless there's something they're trying to hide. Let's take another common micro-expression: guilt. Guilt often appears through lowered eyes, a furrowed brow, and a downward tilt of the head. Let's say she's telling you about a situation that happened with a male friend, and she assures you nothing happened. But as she says it, her eyes drop, and her smile fades briefly before returning. She doesn't even notice she did it. That moment of guilt, that's your signal. She's uncomfortable with what she's saying, not because she's nervous, but because she knows the truth and her body is leaking it, despite her mouth trying to cover it up. Even the absence of a fitting micro-expression can be a red flag. For example, when someone tells a sad story or expresses regret but shows no signs of sadness, no brow lowering, no lip corner depression, no eye softening, it can indicate that the story isn't genuine. It's not that they have to cry, but there's usually some facial resonance with what they're claiming to feel. When the expression doesn't match the emotion, there's often a reason. So when a woman says, "I felt so bad about how I treated you," but her face stays neutral or even amused, pay attention. That mismatch might be signaling manipulation or dishonesty. Training yourself to detect micro-expressions isn't about becoming suspicious of every word someone says. It's about becoming emotionally aware, grounded, and tuned in to the signals people send without realizing it. Most men get caught up in what they're feeling in the moment: anger, disappointment, confusion. But when you step back, watch, and listen, not just to her words, but to her face, you begin to see the truth that words can't hide. You stop getting played, you stop second-guessing yourself, and you start trusting what's real, not what's rehearsed. Because micro-expressions are not something anyone can control. They're the body's reaction to truth. And once you learn to read them, you'll never look at a conversation the same way again. When it comes to uncovering deception, one of the clearest giveaways is inconsistency in storytelling. A lie, no matter how small, requires construction. It has to be built, maintained, and remembered. But the human brain isn't naturally wired to recall fabricated details with the same clarity and consistency as it does real experiences. That's where liars often trip up. A woman who isn't telling you the full truth may deliver a story that sounds convincing the first time, but over time, the cracks start to show. She forgets what she said previously, the timeline doesn't add up, the details change subtly but noticeably. If you're not actively paying attention, it's easy to brush these changes off as minor or meaningless. But if you're emotionally intelligent and aware, you'll realize that these inconsistencies are often signs that something deeper is being concealed. For example, let's say she told you she went to dinner with her friends on Saturday night. The first time she tells the story, it's, "Yeah, I met up with Sarah, Jenna, and Rena at this sushi place downtown. We stayed out till around 11. You make a mental note of it, not pressing the issue. But 2 weeks later, while you're both watching something on TV, you casually mention that you've been craving sushi. She replies, "Oh, I haven't had sushi in forever." Instantly, your mind flags that. Wait a second, didn't she say she had sushi with her friends just 2 weeks ago? That contradiction might seem small, but it's significant. Either she forgot what she told you, which usually doesn't happen when someone is recalling a real experience, or she wasn't actually at that sushi dinner and never thought she'd be held to the details. That's what happens when people lie. They throw out believable stories, but don't have the emotional memory to keep them consistent. Inconsistencies also often show up when a woman is being intentionally vague. Let's say she tells you she was just running errands on a day when she was unusually hard to reach. You ask what kind of errands. She says she was at the pharmacy, then picked up groceries, and had to return something at the mall. A week later, in another conversation, you bring up a new pharmacy that opened nearby, and she says, "Oh, I haven't been to the pharmacy in weeks." That's an inconsistency right there. If she went just last week, why does she say it's been weeks? The lie wasn't in the original story. It was in the fact that her alibi was never genuine to begin with, so she didn't store it in her memory as a real experience. The next time she casually references it, she forgets the fabricated timeline. This is how inconsistencies pile up. They're not always obvious at first, but they reveal a pattern of carelessness in dishonesty. You might also notice inconsistencies when it comes to how emotionally connected she is to the story. People who are telling the truth tend to remember not just what happened, but how it felt. There's emotional continuity in their stories, but when someone's lying, their story often lacks emotional depth or continuity. Let's say she tells you she had an amazing night out with her girlfriends, fun, relaxing, full of laughter. A few days later, she casually mentions that she left early because she had a headache. Now ask yourself, if it was such an amazing night, why would she leave early? And more importantly, why wasn't that detail part of the original story? Real memories tend to include emotional moments, like leaving early due to not feeling well. Omitting or changing those emotional touch points can signal the story wasn't as real as she claimed it to be. Another red flag lies in the evolution of unnecessary detail. When people lie, they often overcompensate by including details that no one asked for, details meant to make the story sound more convincing. but over time, those same people may forget what specific filler details they used. For example, she may originally say she was at a friend's house watching a movie and that they ordered pizza from a specific place. The next time she tells the story, she mentions cooking dinner themselves. Now, a change like that isn't just about forgetting, it's about losing control of the fabricated reality she created, and the more she talks, the harder it becomes to keep the false version of events intact. If you really want to test the consistency of a woman's story, bring it up again later, but from a different angle. Don't ask her to repeat the story, just mention something that was supposedly a part of it. Say, "Did you ever find that scarf you lost when you were out with Sarah and Jenna that night?" If she hesitates, looks confused, or corrects you by saying, "Wait, I wasn't with Jenna, it was Mia," then you've caught another inconsistency. Real events, especially ones you've emotionally experienced, don't get confused that easily. You don't forget who you were with. You don't change the location. You don't suddenly remember things differently unless the memory wasn't real to begin with. Ultimately, stories should match in structure, emotion, and detail across time. When they don't, it's usually not because the person has a bad memory. It's because the truth wasn't being told in the first place. The double back technique is one of the most powerful, underrated tools for exposing a lie, especially when you're dealing with someone who's skilled at manipulating the truth. What makes this technique so effective is that it bypasses their prepared answers and catches them off guard by revisiting previously covered ground from a new angle. Most people, when they lie, do so with the assumption that once a topic has been discussed, it's closed. They don't expect to be questioned again about the same event or detail, especially after some time has passed. That's where the trap is set. When you circle back, unexpectedly and casually, you force them to retrieve a fabricated memory. And because false memories don't have the emotional or sensory depth that real ones do, the liar will often falter, contradict themselves, or provide a different version of the story. That's when the truth starts to leak through the cracks. Let's say, for example, a woman tells you she went to dinner with her coworkers last Thursday night. She gives you some surface-level details, where they ate, who was there, and what time she got home. At the moment, everything checks out, and she seems confident in her delivery. Now, instead of pushing or showing suspicion, you let it go. You keep the conversation light. You don't challenge her. You let her believe that you accepted the story at face value. But then, a few days later, you circle back, not by asking her to repeat the story, but by referencing it casually in a new context. Maybe you say, "You mentioned that new Italian place you went to on Thursday. Was it busy that night?" That question seems harmless, but watch her reaction. If she hesitates, stumbles over her words, or gives a different description of the place, or worse, asks what Italian place, you've just poked a hole in the narrative. You've used the double back to catch her off guard. The brilliance of the double back technique is in how subtle it is. It doesn't look like you're interrogating. It doesn't come off as aggressive. It appears as genuine curiosity or small talk. But beneath that surface, what you're really doing is testing for consistency. Because people who lie don't rehearse the lie in multiple variations. They construct a version of the story that fits the moment, deliver it, and mentally move on. But the truth? It doesn't shift. If she really was at that restaurant with those co-workers, then no matter when you ask her about it or how you frame the question, her answers will remain aligned. But if it was a cover story, if she wasn't where she claimed to be, then each time you circle back, the details begin to warp. Consider another example. She tells you she was at her best friend's apartment all Saturday night watching movies. You nod? Make no fuss about it. But a week later, while scrolling social media, you mention a viral movie meme and say, "Didn't you say you watched that movie last weekend at Lisa's place? Was it any good?" That sounds like a friendly question, but it's also a setup. If she suddenly responds with confusion, saying, "Wait, I didn't watch that?" Or if she gives a completely different name for the movie than what she mentioned earlier, then you've caught an inconsistency. The double back has done its job. It's not just about what she says. It's about how quickly she scrambles to match her new answer with her previous one. And in that scramble, her story often starts to fall apart. Another powerful way to apply this technique is by revisiting emotional details. People who tell the truth tend to remember not just what happened, but how they felt in the moment. But liars focus on facts. They try to sound believable by giving clean, logical timelines. So the next time you double back, do it through an emotional lens. Say something like, "You said you were exhausted when you got back from Sarah's party last weekend. Was it just the crowd or something that happened there?" Now, you're not just testing factual consistency, you're checking emotional continuity. If she gave a previously calm, positive version of the night, and now she's suggesting it was overwhelming or awkward, that's a red flag. The emotional texture of the lie wasn't stored properly, so now it doesn't match. What makes the double back so successful is that it simulates real-life memory retrieval. You're not drilling her with the same questions in the same tone. You're recreating a natural context where the truth, if it's there, will remain stable. If her story starts shifting under these light, indirect returns to the same topic, you now have patterns of inconsistency, not just isolated slips. And these patterns reveal far more than any one mistake ever could. The double back is about patience, observation, and timing. It's about allowing the person enough space and comfort to reveal themselves over and over again until the truth either holds up or breaks down, because someone who's telling the truth can stand in it repeatedly from any angle at any time. But someone who's lying will eventually get lost in the version they can't remember how to defend. One of the most overlooked yet powerful signs that someone may be lying is emotional mismatch, the disconnect between what a person is saying and the emotion they're showing while saying it. Human beings are emotional creatures. When something significant happens to us, whether it's exciting, painful, shameful, or funny, it registers in our bodies, our voices, and especially our faces. Our emotions don't just exist in the words we choose. They leak out through our tone, our energy, our expressions, and our timing. When a woman is telling you something that's supposed to carry emotional weight, and her body language doesn't reflect any of that emotional tone, it should set off internal alarms, because that mismatch often signals a story that's been altered, concealed, or entirely fabricated. Take, for instance, a woman who tells you she felt heartbroken when her ex broke up with her. She describes how difficult it was, how she couldn't eat or sleep, and how it shattered her self-esteem. But as she's telling you this, she's smiling faintly. Her voice is calm and steady, and there's not the slightest hint of pain in her body language. Her face is relaxed, maybe even amused at points. That's an emotional mismatch. The words say heartbreak, but the body is expressing neutrality or even pleasure. It doesn't add up. A real emotional memory, especially a recent one, will usually come with a corresponding tone, or at least a visible tension in the voice, in the face, or in the posture. Even if someone has healed from an experience, talking about it typically brings back something, a shadow of the emotion. When that shadow is completely missing, you have to ask yourself why. Let's look at another common situation. You confront her about something serious, maybe a message you saw or a conversation she had that made you uncomfortable. She immediately denies any wrongdoing and says, "You're overthinking it. I would never lie to you." Now, those words on their own may sound sincere, but her expression while saying them is blank. No urgency, no concern, no defensiveness, just flat. That's not how someone looks when they're falsely accused and genuinely upset about it. When someone is telling the truth and their integrity is being questioned, there's usually some emotional reaction: hurt, frustration, surprise, confusion. The absence of all those emotions can be a big sign that she's not reacting authentically and that the emotion she's showing doesn't match the gravity of what's being discussed. Emotional mismatch can also work in the opposite direction, when someone overreacts emotionally to something that doesn't call for it. For example, if you ask a simple question like, "Where were you last night?" and she immediately becomes overly defensive, angry, or offended, more than the situation warrants, that can also be a sign she's covering something up. The intensity of the emotion doesn't match the simplicity of the question. It's the body going into overdrive to compensate for a feeling of being exposed. Genuine people don't usually fly off the handle unless there's been a pattern of mistrust. But when the question is casual and the reaction is explosive, something deeper is often at play. Imagine she tells you she ran into her ex randomly at a coffee shop, and they only exchanged a quick hello before she walked away. But while telling you this, she seems unusually tense. Her shoulders are stiff, her smile is forced, and she keeps avoiding eye contact. Now think about the story again. If it truly was an innocent, brief encounter, why is her body reacting like she's under interrogation? That physical anxiety doesn't match the casual tone of the story. That's emotional mismatch. Her nervous system is telling a different story than her mouth, and it's that contradiction you need to learn to recognize. Another subtle but powerful sign is when someone uses emotionally charged words, but doesn't seem connected to those emotions. Say she talks about how scary a situation was, or how guilty she felt about something, but there's no real fear in her eyes, no guilt in her posture, no change in vocal tone. These are words with weight, and when someone has truly felt them, it shows. You hear it in the breath, see it in the pacing, feel it in the hesitation. When someone throws out these heavy emotional labels, casually or robotically, it's often a signal they're trying to manufacture credibility instead of telling the raw truth. Emotional mismatch isn't always about lies. Sometimes it's about what's being hidden beneath the surface: shame, regret, resentment, or even affection. But when the words and the emotions don't line up, there's always something worth examining. Because real stories have emotional fingerprints. They live in the body, not just in the mouth. And when you become skilled at recognizing that disconnect, when you train yourself to listen with your eyes and not just your ears, you begin to see what's really being said, even when the truth is being buried under a polished performance. The reverse confidence trap is one of the most manipulative yet dangerously effective tactics a deceptive woman can use, and if you're not mentally sharp or emotionally grounded, it will leave you second-guessing your instincts and questioning your own sanity. At its core, this tactic involves a liar, often someone very aware of her charm, her image, or her ability to control perception, projecting so much confidence and composure while lying that it makes you doubt yourself. It's a psychological inversion. Instead of acting nervous, evasive, or defensive like most liars, she leans into the lie with a level of poise and calm that flips the situation. Now you start feeling like the insecure one, the paranoid one, the irrational one. That's how the trap is set. You begin to internalize doubt, while she stands unwavering in false certainty. Let's say, for example, you bring up a red flag you noticed. Maybe it's a flirtatious message from a guy in her DMs or a story she told that didn't quite add up. Instead of reacting with surprise or denial, she looks you straight in the eye, completely composed, and says something like, "Wow, I didn't expect this from you. I thought we were better than this." She doesn't just deflect the question, she flips the emotional weight back onto you. She questions your trust, your judgment, and your confidence. Her calm delivery makes her appear like the rational one in the room, while you're left feeling like the unstable partner who's reading too much into things. And because she shows zero signs of panic, you hesitate. You start thinking, maybe I really am overreacting. That's the power of the reverse confidence trap. Confidence is often confused with truth. Our minds are wired to associate certainty with honesty. If someone seems sure of what they're saying, they must be telling the truth, right? But a skilled manipulator knows that and uses it to her advantage. She understands that by showing zero emotional signs of guilt or dishonesty, she can throw you off track. Even if every bone in your body is telling you something's off, Her unwavering tone, her direct eye contact, and her emotional stability make you doubt what you feel. And that's when she gains power over your perception. She doesn't need to shout or cry or beg, she just needs to not flinch. This tactic is especially potent when the woman in question knows how to weaponize empathy. She might say, "I've never felt so judged for being honest," or "I don't understand why you'd think I'd lie about something like this." And she says it with such disappointment, such grace, that you start to feel ashamed for even questioning her. You're the one apologizing by the end of the conversation, even if you were the one being lied to. That's how deep the manipulation runs. The reverse confidence is so subtle, so emotionally intelligent, that it doesn't come off like defensiveness. It comes off like emotional maturity. But beneath that mask is a calculated effort to suppress your intuition and silence your questions. Another example of this can play out in social settings. Let's say you sense something strange about her interaction with a male friend. You ask her if there's ever been anything between them. She laughs softly, not nervously, but almost affectionately, and says, "You're cute. He's like my brother." The tone is so dismissive and relaxed that you feel embarrassed for even bringing it up. She didn't answer with facts, she answered with controlled demeanor. And because she didn't break character, no hesitation, no aggression, you're inclined to believe her. But a woman who's telling the truth can still show traces of irritation or frustration when she's unfairly accused. The one who lies with polished composure, who refuses to show any crack in the mask, is the one who has rehearsed her performance. The trap works even better when the liar knows that you value emotional intelligence and communication. She knows that as long as she doesn't yell, as long as she speaks with clarity and grace, she'll appear more believable than your instincts will feel. So while your gut is screaming that something doesn't make sense, she calmly walks you in circles, convincing you that your suspicions are a product of insecurity or fear, not insight. She'll even praise you subtly while lying to you, saying things like, "You're smarter than this," or "You know I'd tell you if something was wrong." Now, not only are you doubting your perception, you're trying to live up to hers. You want to be the partner who doesn't accuse, who stays cool, who's worthy of her supposedly transparent behavior. It becomes a psychological mind game where your desire to be seen as trusting is manipulated against you. And perhaps the most dangerous part of the reverse confidence trap is that it leaves no immediate evidence. There's no shouting, no slipping up, no nervous behavior you can replay in your mind. All you remember is how certain she was. And that certainty, especially when you're emotionally invested, feels more real than the questions you were asking. The more you replay it, the more you wonder if you were wrong. And as long as she keeps her act polished, never overly emotional, never defensive, you'll keep suppressing your suspicions, convincing yourself that you just need to trust her a little more. But what you're actually doing is falling deeper into a well-constructed illusion, where the liar doesn't look like a deceiver at all. She looks like the most stable person in the room. So here's what it comes down to. Trust isn't just about taking someone's word. It's about observing what their words do when they're spoken. Do they line up with reality? Do their emotions match their message? Do they maintain consistency when you circle back? Or do cracks start to show when they think you're no longer watching? Whether it's a micro expression that slips through the cracks, a story that shifts under pressure, or confidence that feels a little too perfect to be natural, your job isn't to become paranoid. Your job is to become aware. The truth isn't always hidden in what's loud. It's often buried in what's too quiet, too smooth, too rehearsed. Pay attention to the subtle disconnects, the mismatched emotions, the overly polished performances. Because once you stop listening only with your ears and start watching with your eyes and feeling with your instincts, you'll never be easy to fool again. Stay sharp, stay grounded, and most importantly, stay honest with yourself.